Hello, sweet sister. Welcome to this week's bonus lesson on the life of Deborah. I'm praying this extra nugget blesses you today. When Deborah was the presiding judge over Israel, there was a considerable amount of land and people she was responsible for. This image is a map of the homeland of each of the judges who ruled over Israel throughout the book of Judges. You can see Deborah in the center. She's number 4. This is the area Deborah was from, but she had responsibility for all of the people living in the Promised Land. Israel had entered the Promised Land under the leadership of Joshua. However, they had not fully conquered and removed all of the people living in the land. Joshua 1:27 tells us, the men of Manasseh did not conquer Beth-shan, Tanakh, or their surrounding towns, nor did they conquer the people living in Dor, Ibleam, Megiddo, or their surrounding towns. The Canaanites managed to remain in those areas. Joshua 1:29 says, the men of Ephraim did not conquer the Canaanites living in Gezer. The Canaanites lived among them in Gezer. Joshua 1:30 tells us that the men of Zebulun did not conquer the people living in Kitron and Nahalol. The Canaanites lived among them and were forced to do hard labor. In verse 31, the same is told of the men of Asher. In verse 33, it's the men of Naphtali. And in verse 34, it's the men of Dan. Many of the tribes did not conquer fully the land. You can see here in the Promised Land, all of the areas where the Israelites' enemies still resided even when they possessed the land. By not fully conquering the land and allowing other people groups to live among them, the Israelites experienced much difficulty and oppression over the years. As their generations died and new ones grew up, often they fell into a cycle of disobedience. Deborah was faithful to God and led with Barak to conquer the Canaanites. You can see from this map the battle area and the tribes that were involved. The dotted blue line shows where the army was routed down the Kishon River. Notice where Sisera was killed. It's the opposite direction of where the troops he led were chased. We know that after Sisera was killed, the land was peaceful for 40 years, and then the cycle started over again. God promised Israel the whole land. They never fully possessed it all. Let that sink in a moment. Never fully possessed it all because they allowed the enemy to live among them. What parallel does that have in your life? What promises has he given you that you've never fully possessed? What enemy do you allow to live in your life without fully eradicating it? The Promised Land was around 300,000 square miles. You may not be in the position that Deborah was, ruling over that much land and millions of people, but God has given you a sphere of influence. If you aren't diligent to get rid of the enemy of pride, greed, self-loathing, insecurity, arrogance, disobedience, or whatever else may be encamped in your sphere, you will struggle just like the Israelites did. Take a good look at your life, the Promised Land God has given you, and commit today to rely on God's strength to rid the enemy from your life so that you can fully enjoy the promises in His Word. I'll be praying for you.